Joining us to answer some questions about the mission and where it's headed, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Defence Minister, James Bezan. Good to have you back, sir.
I'm glad to be with you, Evan.
So let's clarify. This was the top debate between Thomas Mulcair and the Prime Minister today. Why is there a different protocol for Canadians? Why are Canadian troops accompanying Kurdish and Iraqi forces to the front lines? Obviously a place where they're in harm's way. U.S. troops say they're carefully not doing it. Why?
Well, I can't speak again to what the Americans are doing or any other coalition partners for that matter. I can tell you that the operations of the Canadian Armed Forces fall within the mandate that was given to them by Parliament. It respects the spirit of that. They are not in any way, shape or form involved in fighting on the front line. They're there advising, assisting, command and control, military planning.
Fighting on the, no, hold on.
No, they're under attack and defending themselves.
Yeah, but that's still fighting. You can say why they're fighting. They are clearly involved in fighting on the front line. We're only debating why they're involved in fighting, not if they're involved in fighting.
Look, they got fired upon in three unfortunate circumstances when they were at the front doing military planning. And, you know, that in itself is self-defense. I can tell you that, you know, with the issue of them being out there and assisting with our air task force, with Operation Impact and our CF-18s and other coalition fighters, and helping them guide their precision guided missiles into ensure that we are hitting the targets we want to eliminate. I'm proud of them for that fact. The Minister has been clear on this, as has so many people from the Canadian Armed Forces who have provided us with the briefings.
Okay, but let's talk about clarity. The military has clearly said the mission, their term has evolved. I want to show our viewers. The Prime Minister was asked a very clear question on, was it advise, assist, and accompany to the front lines, or just advise and assist? Here's what the Prime Minister said September 30th.
It's quite precise. It's to advise and to assist. It is not to accompany, and I think that was laid out before the parliamentary committee.
When did it change? The Prime Minister, September 30th, said, we are not going to accompany. Now we know that they do accompany 20% of the time to the front lines. That's a change. Why was Parliament and Canadian, why were we not informed by that earlier?
Evan, I have to clarify, you know, that whole term, everybody's assuming that we're going to be there on the front, on the battles, taking the fight to ISIL, making sure that we're fighting alongside Iraqi security forces, and that's not what we're doing. We are there, and I've said right from the get-go, the Minister has said, and as the Prime Minister has said, aid and assist includes command and control. It includes helping them with military planning. It includes helping with training. It's not just a training mission.
No,
but training mission is what we did at the end of the
Afghan. But it's hard for me to say, I'm going to play the clip again. The Prime Minister is very precise, and this is what, listen, this is not an argument about what Canada should or shouldn't be doing. It's what was told that we were doing. Now, I'll play this clip again. The Prime Minister was very specific, and I take him at his word here. Here's the Prime Minister, September 30th, and I'll contrast that with what the U.S. has said. Here's the Prime Minister.
It's quite precise. It's to advise and to assist. It is not to accompany, and I think that was laid out before the parliamentary committee.
He says precise, it is not to accompany. We are accompanying. Why did that change?
Look, again, let's go back to when these first situations were revealed by General Rouleau. Full disclosure on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defence and our government is to inform Canadians that our Canadian Armed Forces, our Special Operation Forces, had come under fire and that they defended themselves and eliminated those targets, which we're very proud of them for eliminating those ISIL jihadists. But let's again be clear, they are not there accompanying in a battle. They are there doing planning, they're scoping out a situation, and have gotten into situations where they had been fired upon. So they, of course, have to defend themselves, and that's all that it has been so far.
But Mr. Bezan, no one suggests, of course, when they're fired upon, and even the opposition said, they can defend themselves. But how did they get to a position where they are doing something the Prime Minister said they wouldn't do? They are accompanying the Kurdish forces to the front lines. And I'm going to tell you, it's very precise. The U.S. Secretary of Defense's office told CBC News yesterday that their forces in Iraq are not doing that. Let me show you exactly what they said. This is the board. We have been very clear that U.S. advisors are removed from actual or expected combat situations as part of our advise and assist mission in Iraq. Their movements are carefully planned in advance and approved at a higher level, with risks identified and mitigated in order to ensure they are not inadvertently put in a combat situation. They're being very precise. And let me ask you again. Does Canada now have different rules of engagement than the coalition partners?
I can tell you every country develops their own rules of engagement. Our rules of engagement reflects the policy and the motion that was approved by Parliament. Our government allows them to go in there and defend themselves. The equipment that they're carrying are there for self-defense purposes. And yeah, they are going to, part of their military planning, part of their advising, part of their command structure is to go there to make sure that when they're providing that advisory role and assisting the Kurdish Peshmerga and Iraqi security forces with defining how they're going to go ahead with an attack, that they have to go out there and see what the lay of the land is.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm just going to say that is clearly different than the U.S. is saying in precise terms, and is different from that September 30th
and
quote
again,
from the Prime Minister.
I can't speak to what other countries do.
Fair enough. But let me ask you, if the evolution went from advise and assist to advise, assist, and accompany, which clearly it's now been, could it evolve further? Let me ask you. And the Defense and the Justice Minister, Peter MacKay, told me in Halifax that, yes, Canada is doing preparatory work that may include extending this mission to bomb ISIS in Syria, where they're taking more territory. Could this mission evolve further and have either CF-18s or Canadian ground forces assisting, accompanying, and advising to fight ISIS in Syria?
I can tell you the mission's evolved substantially. We've been able to stop the aggression of ISIL. They have not been able to take more territory. And matter of fact, we've been able to push them back. We've been able to take over major supply routes that tie ISIL to Mosul. And if we can help the Iraqi security forces actually go out and liberate Mosul, that's what the coalition wants to see happen. I'm very proud of the work that we've done through the Canadian Armed Forces.
But could it evolve towards Syria?
Well, look, any change from that standpoint will require, again, parliamentary approval. We're only 3 months into the 6-month approval, and we have to return to Parliament if this is going to be extended, if it's going to be changed, or if we decide to end it. So all those things are on the table. We are committed to seeing the defeat of ISIL. We're committed to seeing that the ethnic minorities and religious minorities are protected, and we also want to make sure that ISIL is not a threat to us here in Canada.
Are you saying that the Canadian government is committed to seeing the defeat of ISIL even in Syria? And I'm just trying to get at, if we've evolved once, where's the evolution going? Let me ask you another question on that. Kurdish media reported, and the Department of National Defense confirmed, that the Chief of the Defense Staff General, Tom Lawson, was in Erbil over the weekend meeting with Kurdish officials. And their BAS News reported that Kurdish officials lobbied for Canada to contribute light armored vehicles to their efforts. Is Canada now considering sending lethal weaponry or light armored vehicles to help the Kurds?
First of all, I'm very proud that General Lawson went and spent time with Kurdish commanders and went and visited our Special Operation Forces in the area. I think that was important. And in those meetings, as it's been reported, there was requests. We're going to consider those requests. We've been very upfront in helping the Kurdish Peshmerga and Iraqi security forces by ensuring that they do have equipment. We helped deliver a bunch of donated lethal aid from other countries. We use the C-17s and our Hercs to deliver that aid. We've also delivered a pile of non-lethal equipment and just delivered over the last couple of weeks a number of kits for winter gear, of flat jackets and helmets. Non-lethal, but we're going to continue to look at what they need and
so you
what
would consider. So you're not ruling out sending labs there, and are you ruling out sending lethal equipment?
Look, we're going to consider all serious options that are on the table, and anything that we can do to help them in their fight against ISIL.
Tonda McCharles
comes down to what's within our own capabilities.
Okay, well that's okay. So that's interesting, because Tonda McCharles, the Star, reported today that Cabinet has just approved changes to Canada's export laws that allow for shipments of prohibited lethal weapons, like handguns or automatic weapons, to countries like Kuwait and Israel. But we've got our Air Force based in Kuwait. Okay, is this a move towards being able to export lethal weapons to Kurdish and Iraqi forces? We've changed our export laws. Is that step one in exporting lethal weapons to the Kurds?
Well, they're not in that list that you just mentioned. We did add Kuwait to it. They are a partner. We do have a defense cooperation agreement with them, so that they were added to the list along with Israel. But that includes all our NATO allies and a number of other allies. We do specialize in manufacturing quite a bit of military equipment in this country, and we'll continue to not only build that military equipment, including.
But you got to be doing it for a reason. I mean, you got an air base in Kuwait now. Are we giving stuff to the Kuwaitis so then they can ship it over to the Kurds? I mean, I'm just trying. Is this a third-party issue? That's why the laws were changed?
We're going to make sure that any requests that come through still have to go through all the due diligence and regulatory processes and permit approvals under foreign affairs. And we have to be satisfied that they live up to what we see as a nation, that we're going to help their security forces and not necessarily seeing that being resold on the world market or supplying countries that aren't approved underneath those regulations.
Last question. Since the news of the gunfire exchange, the third gunfire exchange between Special Forces and ISIS, have Canadian Special Forces either upped the time they're spending at the front line, changed the amount of time, or are they still at the front lines, as it's described, 20% of the time?
And all I can say is what's been reported by General Rouleau and others, Captain Forget, and that is that our troops are splitting their time about 80-20 right now.
All right, I got to leave it there. James Bezan, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence. I know the Minister will appear at committee alongside John Baird tomorrow. There'll be more questions from parliamentarians, sir. I appreciate your time as always.
Hey, my pleasure.